Ladies and gentlemen, will you please put your hands together for Ryan Stroud?
It was September 10th, 2001. I was 23 years old. I was enlisted in the U.S. Navy, and I was on leave on the Hawaiian island of Kauai. And it was the end of my leave, and I just felt like I needed a really special experience, something that would really nourish my soul through the coming weeks and months and years of going back to the grind of stoicism and discipline and spit and polish. So I asked a bunch of locals, where do I go? Where's the happening stuff happening? And a couple of them said, go to this place called Secrets Beach. Now, I've lived on the coast for much of my life, and every local spot has a secrets beach. So I knew, though, this would be a special place. I decided that I would go to Secrets Beach, I'd explore it for the afternoon, I'd spend the night, and in the morning, I would begin my journey back to my base on the mainland. I decided to go full bohemian. I was wearing nothing but a pair of pants, which as the day began to heat up, turned into a terrible idea because as I was hitchhiking down the road, the asphalt started heating up and burning my feet. But eventually I got a ride, and the ride took me to a dirt road, and then I got out of the vehicle, and I jumped a barbed wire fence, and I hiked across this cow pasture, and then I came to this cliff. And I looked down, and I saw the most beautiful white sand beach stretched out for a mile, and the ocean glittering like diamonds as far as the eye could see. And I knew this was the place. I found this trail, and I made my way down to the beach, and I slowly walked from one end to the other. And when I got to the far end, I found this cluster of tide pools that had been warmed in the sun, and there's a small group of hippie-looking people in there, naked, arms stretched out, having a great time. And, you know, I'm very comfortable with public nudity now, but at the time, I was a little outside of my comfort zone, but I've always been kind of a rule breaker, too, so I was like, I'm going to go with it. And I took off my pants, and I got in the tide pool that they were in, just enough distance from them that it wasn't too awkward. But again, I was in the military at the time, and I was very stoic. I'm still kind of stoic. I've always kind of been kind of stoic, and I think I was kind of like harshing their mellow, because after maybe a little while, they got up and just left. So I'm laying in this tide pool with my arms stretched out, and I think, you know, this is great, but this could be better. And I close my eyes, and I begin to fantasize and visualize what would be better. I visualize that from behind a rocky outcropping, a beautiful woman with tan skin and long dark hair, wearing nothing but a white see-through sarong, would begin walking toward me. And I open my eyes, and from behind a rocky outcropping, a beautiful woman with tan, dark skin and long, dark hair, wearing nothing but a see-through sarong over her shoulders, a white one, begins walking straight toward me. Again, I was in the military. I got piss tested on the regular. This is not a drug story. I was totally sober. I could barely believe my eyes. And as she approached, it suddenly seemed kind of weird that I would just sit there while she's like directly gazing at me. So I got out of the tide pool, but then I'm standing kind of dripping wet in the sand and don't really know like where to put my hands. And she walks right up to me and she leans down and picks up a stick. And she draws this big circle around us in the sand. And then in the circle, she walks up to me and she grabs both of my hands in hers. And she says, "My name is Pele." Of course, I was like, "Well, hi, my name is Ryan, and how's it going? And where are you from?" And she was like, with body language and visceral emotion, indicated that she would not speak further, and I was not to press her further to speak. She was emphatic, almost angrily emphatic about that. And this seemed very weird to me, but I was already in this total limbic space of wonder, and so I just decided to go with it. We spent the rest of the afternoon together, and it was incredible. She went running down the beach, and I followed her, and we were laughing. She took my hand and led me out into the ocean, and we swam way out and then back, and we were body surfing, and there were sea turtles all around. Then we sat in the sand, and she was tracing the tattoos on my back. And then there was this moment when I started to get pretty hungry. And I'd thought, I'm going to go to this beach, and guavas were in season, and avocados, and I thought, I'll just find some fruit while I'm there, but there was like no fruit on any of the trees, and I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do? And I'm looking out to sea thinking about this, and I turn back around, and Pele has this little coy smile on her face, and she has a pile of fruit in her lap. And then later, in the evening, when the sun began to set, again, there was kind of a pause, a break in our interaction, and again, I was looking out to sea. It was getting remarkably chilly, and I was getting cold. And I turned back around, and Pele had a fire in front of her. Now, I have lived half of my life in wilderness areas, and I've been to survival school, and I can make a fire with sticks, but it would take me like 8 hours. And it would have taken me 2 hours to make a fire on that beach if I'd had a lighter. And she did not even have a backpack, let alone pockets. But she stood up and again came to me. She took both of her hands, my hands in hers, and she said the second thing that I ever heard her say. She said, "And now this." And then she leaned up and kissed me on the lips, and I kissed her back. And then we were just tangled in each other. And my hands were in her hair, and they were on her breasts. And I slid a hand down between her legs, and she was very wet, and I got down on my knees, and I slid a finger inside of her, and I was licking her, and I remember so clearly that she smelled like no woman I had ever been with. She smelled earthy, like the jungle. And then she laid back and pulled me to her, and we made love right there in the sand. And I want to pause for a moment to say that I learned something that night, which is you don't want to get sand on your penis. I was being very cautious about that. And there was this moment when the sarong fell away, and I actually touched her shoulders, and there were like these deep indentations in them, which I had never seen before, I've never seen since. And again, I thought that was kind of strange, but I was just going with it. And we made love until we were done, and then we laid there, curled up next to each other, and fell asleep in the sand to the sound of waves crashing on the shore. And when I woke up, it was maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. There was this really, really thick fog that had rolled over the beach. And Pele, I could barely see her. She was down at the water's edge, just barely could see her walking right there where the water meets the shore. And I fell back asleep. And when I woke up again, it was mid-morning. The sun was bright in the sky. I was drenched in sweat. And I was totally dehydrated. And I looked around, and Pele was completely gone. But there was this man running toward me down the beach. And he has like this frantic look in his eyes. And he's waving his arms. And that's how I learned, well, he told me what was happening in that moment in New York City. And it was like I could see the Twin Towers falling in his eyes. And it was a couple of months later. The whole world seemed like it had changed. And I was trying to wrap my mind around these changes, and I was reading a lot about war. And I picked up this book about myths of war. And much to my astonishment, I saw that there was an entire chapter about a Hawaiian goddess named Pele. So, of course, I instantly flipped to the chapter. And what I read there utterly shook me to the core. It said that Pele, being a goddess, has many magical abilities. She can spontaneously manifest food and fire. She is a goddess of fire. It said very specifically that you will recognize Pele in her human form because she has these deep craters on her shoulders, like the craters in cooling lava. And the final thing it said was that every once in a blue moon, Pele travels from the big island of Hawaii to the Hawaiian island of Kauai, and there she finds a mortal who she engages in a sex ritual that opens a portal that leads to a global war. Now, to be completely honest with you, I don't know. I don't know if what I experienced there was mere coincidence or something a little more synchronistic. Maybe it was a real mystical event. But what I do know is that after that, I was always a lot more careful about what I wished for. And I was always a lot more cautious about who I hooked up with. Because you just never know. That stranger at the bar or that stranger on the beach, they might end up being a goddess or a god. And I don't want to accidentally end up destroying the world. Thank you.